How's it going, guys? Andrew here with Justified EDC, and this is going to be, and this is not a review or anything like that. This is kind of a personal video. I just wanted to go over some of the issues I have with a lot of designs that I see, mainly sharpening choils and forward finger choils. They're two things that in the knife community you see a lot. You see a lot of people complain when knives don't have those. You more see people complaining when knives don't have sharpening choils, and people really like their forward finger choils. So what I mean by both of those, and we're kind of going to get into both of them, we're going to talk about them separately, and then kind of talk about why they're so prolific and why people think they need them. So the first thing that we're going to go over is sharpening choils, but let me go into just what sharpening choils and forward finger choils are for those who aren't familiar. A sharpening choil, as you can see right here, by the way, this is the lion steel round head, but a sharpening choil is this little notch ground at the end of a blade, right at the end of the sharpened edge before it hits the ricasso, right at the end of the plunge grind, and when done correctly, will clear that plunge grind and be kind of out in there where the actual flat of the grind starts. It's that little notch, and the purpose of it is when you're sharpening, you're not going to start getting a heel on the back of the blade. You're actually going to be able to get right up to where the sharpened edge starts and sharpen the full length of it, as opposed to something like this here. This is the Spyderco Andella in K390, where, as you can see, after it's been sharpened a couple times without that sharpening notch, you start to get a little heel on the back of the blade that you're not going to be able to get like a really great edge on. It's going to start to ramp up a little bit as you sharpen higher up on the blade. And so that's what sharpening choils are. A forward finger choil, on the other hand, is using this here. This is actually my wife's knife. This is the Spyderco Little Native, I believe. So the forward finger choil is this curved bit here in the front that you are able to choke up on the blade and get your finger up in here, where the full grip of the knife is back here, but you kind of only have like a 3-finger grip. But with that forward finger choil, that's partially in the handle and then onto the ricasso of the blade, you're able to choke up on that and get a 4-finger grip. So I try to pull the best examples of each of these that I have for my collection, but I don't have a ton of knives with, I really don't have a ton of knives with forward finger choils. And I don't have a lot with sharpening choils because I don't like them. I don't understand why people like them so much. I think I understand it, but I think it's a little bit misguided. So let's get right into this. So first of all, we're going to go over sharpening choils. So we're going to use this example here again, the Lion Steel Bestman. The reason I don't like sharpening choils is if you've ever been cutting with a knife that has a sharpening choil, especially a larger one, the smaller ones sometimes aren't an issue, especially the longer blade you get, the farther away you're cutting is usually going to be from that sharpening choil. But if you've ever been cutting with a knife with a sharpening choil, especially in any kind of either draw cut where you're or push cut, excuse me, where you're kind of pushing down through. Picture you have a piece of cardboard and you're pushing down through that cardboard, or you're doing a draw cut where you're pulling the knife through something. That sharpening choil usually ends up catching on the material, depending on what you're cutting. I find it happens a lot cutting up cardboard. That's something I do a lot, but even any kind of strapping or anything like that, the sharpening choil has a tendency to get caught up in that. And so that's the reason I don't like them. I know a lot of people that, and again, I'm going to make some generalizations, but people that don't use their knives all that much, they kind of collect them and they carry them and they use them a little bit, but they're kind of more snobby about things like action and materials and all that stuff more than the performance of the knife. Really like sharpening choils because they don't like that when they sharpen their knife, which usually they're not even doing other than to put like a nicer looking edge on, but when they sharpen the knife, they start to get that heel on the blade and they don't like how it looks. What I would say to that is if you're going to have a sharpening choil back here that's already taking up some bit of your cutting length, right? So you either have a sharpening choil here that has a little bit of a cutout here, so you're missing that little bit of sharpened edge, or you have a knife like the Andella where the edge comes all the way back to the ricasso. Eventually, after you sharpen that for a little bit, that's going to become unusable edge. But the difference is this doesn't snag on anything. If anything, it's just going to kind of hit whatever you're cutting and then fall right onto the edge. You're not going to get bind up in anything. You're not going to get caught up in the material that you're cutting. Whereas something like this with a sharpening choil will. And so to me, I think it's really just kind of the visual and the fact that knife companies have kind of pumped into people that they need a sharpening choil. I know I've talked to some custom knife makers that are friends of mine, especially like Auxiliary Manufacturing, and he says, this is kind of a bad example of it because it's on his pocket belly model, which doesn't have a sharpening choil, but he says when he does sharpening choils on knives, he only does that for the user, the customer, because people want it. And people that don't know how to sharpen as well often really mess up the heel of the blade when they're sharpening, and this is kind of the easy way to avoid that. So it's just kind of been something that's you hear tossed around in knife YouTube and knife reviews all the time of, oh man, why doesn't this knife have a sharpening choil? Oh, I had to cut one in myself. Oh, it's so much easier to sharpen now. It's like, okay, well, if you were actually using your knife for stuff daily a lot, you would know that that's only hindering the performance of the knife. If you start to sharpen it and you start to get that little heel on the back of the blade, that's fine, because you wouldn't have had that there in the first place anyway with a sharpening choil, and now you're not getting caught up on anything. It's just going to kind of slip off that little spot and go right into your cut. It's not going to be a detriment to you at all. The only reason that you wouldn't want that is because you don't like how it looks, which is a silly reason to hinder a knife's cutting performance with a dumb little notch that's going to get caught on things. So that's my reasoning why I don't like sharpening choils. I really do just think people hear that kind of parroted around, so they keep parroting it that knives need sharpening choils. They really don't. If you start using your knives a whole lot, you're going to realize that knives without sharpening choils are a lot better. Same with here. Spyderco is really good with this. They don't put sharpening choils on a lot of their knives. And so you can see here on, this is the Spyderco Caribbean. Full flat grind, edge goes all the way back to the handle. And as you can see there, this has been sharpened once. And you're starting to get a little bit of unevenness right down there by the edge, but that's okay, because again, especially on a bigger knife like this, you have so much sharpened edge length. If you're going into a draw cut and you get to that point where you're drawing, the material's coming in, all of a sudden you're stuck on that and you can't push down any further. You kind of have to pull the knife out of whatever you're cutting and do it again. Same thing with a push cut. I keep mixing up push and draw cuts. Push cut. With a draw cut, same thing. You're cutting into that material, and all of a sudden you hit, or you're kind of slicing into it, and you all of a sudden hit where that choil is, and now you're caught up. You got to pull the knife out. It's just really annoying. One of my favorite knives actually recently has this problem. This is the TRM Neutron 2. I love this knife. This is my only complaint with it, and this one isn't as bad as some other ones because it is kind of wider here. This is kind of like partially a finger choil, partially a sharpening choil, but I have noticed a lot of times this kind of hooked heel here on the back of the blade, when I'm doing push cuts, I'm doing draw cuts, especially in stuff like cardboard, this gets caught up on the material, and I end up having to pull the knife out and go back into my cut again. And especially with cardboard, it gets caught up on that, and it all bunches up, and then it's harder to start your cut again. I would just rather that not be there at all. I would have rather that they just kind of push that off kind of like that. I either have it come all the way back and kind of angle it like that so that there's no sharp angle, and I actually might end up doing that myself, kind of grinding off the corner of that so it's a little more flat. I'm going to lose a little bit of edge just kind of like that, but I'm not going to get caught up in my cuts. So that's my thing with sharpening choils. Forward finger choils, this is going to be more of a personal preference thing. I do genuinely believe that you lose a lot of performance with forward finger choils on most knives. However, there are some cases where forward finger choils make sense. And the place where I think forward finger choils make sense is in very small folding knives. And the reason I say that is, again, we're going to use the Little Native as an example. Your grip area here, if we're just looking at your grip area minus the forward finger choil, that's the area that you have to grip. Now, I wear like medium-sized gloves, medium to large, depending on the brand. When I hold this knife in my hand just on that main grip area, I can really only get if I'm kind of hammer fisting it, I can get like 3.5 But if I'm going to use this in a saber grip at all, I'm really only getting 3-finger grip on this. It's not the most secure grip in the world. Now, again, do you really need that secure of a grip on a little knife like this? Probably not. You're just going to be using your little utility cuts. But if you want a full grip on a little knife like this, the best way to do that is a forward finger choil. And the reason that being for that is you can add it to, it's kind of partially part of the handle and it's part of the ricasso on the blade. So part of that finger choil, instead of making all of this handle, picture the rest of this was covered in G10 and then your pivot started up here, using that part of the ricasso, you're able to choke up on there and get a full 4-finger grip. Even in saber grip where your fingers are kind of angled back, you can get a full grip on the knife, but part of that choil folds into the handle, keeping the handle nice and short. So you have a much shorter package in your pocket. Don't read into that statement, but you have that full grip that handle provides now. One of the caveats I'll say with that is I wish that on more forward finger choils on small knives like this, where it does make sense to have one, that they didn't put this nub on here. They didn't force the choil to be a complete half moon. And the reason I say that is because, again, if the point of the forward finger choil is to maximize your grip area, why would you put this point here so that now like that's uncomfortable to hold right there if I put my finger right over that. So you're kind of pushing and forcing the user into this choil here like that. That's really the only grip you can use the forward finger choil in. If you knock that nub off, kind of just make it a gradual sweep up to the end of the handle, kind of like that, then you can use that whole handle. You can move, depending on your hand size, depending on what grip you're doing, you can kind of move your hand up and down there and use that whole handle. But because it's pointed like that and it's forced into an actual half circle finger choil, that's the only grip you can use it in now. One of the other knives that has this problem is actually one of my favorite knives. One of the knives I've had the longest time is the Spyderco Para 3. Now again, this one's kind of borderline whether or not it needs a forward finger choil. For my hand size, again, the main grip area right there, I can get a full 4-finger grip. Even in saber grip, I can get 4 fingers. But I get people with larger hands might want that forward finger choil to be able to get a full grip on it, but maintain the small size, the small size of the Para 3. But like the little native, the stock Para 3 has a little nub there like that normally. Now I ground that off, as you can see there. And now what you have is not only can you choke all the way up on it like this and get right up behind that edge, but because there's no nub sticking out there, I can move my hand back and forth anywhere I want and actually use that whole area. So that's kind of what I would like to see. If designs for smaller folding knives are going to use forward finger choils, I would like to not see them force you into that kind of like semicircle half moon cut. I would rather it just kind of gradually progress into that forward finger choil, and then you can use the whole grip area. That's kind of just what makes the most sense to me. Forward finger choils I really don't like is when the full, and I don't have a good example of this here because I don't like these knives, but I think one of the examples that I can think of right off the bat is like the Quiet Carry Drift, where the full finger choil is actually cut into the blade. So we're going to use this as an example here. Picture basically a semicircle cut out into this portion of the blade here. So your actual full finger choil is on the blade. It's not part of the handle and part of the blade. It is fully on the blade. I think that's really dumb for 2 reasons. One, you're just taking away sharpened edge for an unnecessary reason, but it's really uncomfortable to just be grabbing the knife with that thin part of the blade, because remember, the grind of that is still going to be in there, so you're holding onto a very thin piece of metal, even though it's not sharpened. It's really not all that comfortable to hold on to, and it puts you up right next to the edge. So again, picture that you have a kind of semicircle cut out right there, kind of like that you have your finger in. Now your finger is right up against that edge. That's not great in my opinion. Like on the Spyderco Para 3 here, you kind of still have a little bit of guard before you start your edge there. So your finger isn't actually riding up against that edge. There's still a little bit of something in the way. There's some jimping here that keeps your finger from slipping forward onto that edge. So I really, really, really don't like knives that have the actual forward finger choil cut out into the blade itself. Not a big fan of that. The only other place that I can see forward finger choils making sense on some large fixed blades that are used for outdoor use. I know, and here, this is the cold steel, what is this, the GI Tonto. I've had this for a long time. I actually ground the top guard off because I want to be able to get my thumb on top there. But it has this forward finger choil here, so you can kind of choke back on the handle and use this for big, like, chopping motions. But if you want to choke up on this and get right up behind that edge to kind of do some finer, like, woodworking, or to kind of put some pressure on here, like, it doesn't even really work with this guard down here, but there are some larger outdoors knives where I can understand wanting to be able to choke back on the knife and get those big chopping motions in, but then choke up around the bottom guard and kind of lock your fingers in there to be able to work with the back of the edge here right up behind the edge. The reason I say on larger knives specifically is because when you have a guard here and it's a big heavy knife, if you didn't have the guard here, even holding up that, it's kind of like unbalanced, but if you can kind of get your fingers around that guard, it kind of locks into your hand a little bit better. However, I can understand the argument for that. I personally, I would rather this didn't have that, and there are some knives where you kind of get like the option. I think there's some like Work Tough Gear large fixed blades where you have the option of a finger choil or not. I think that's a great thing to do so that people that want it can have it and people that think it's useless don't have to have it. But if you brought this edge all the way down to this guard, you can still do all your big chopping motions. There's a lanyard point back here so you can use this and not have to worry about it coming out of your hand. But if this edge came all the way down to this guard and I wanted to choke up and kind of use the edge that was right back here, I can do that right up to the guard. I have a full grip and I'm not gripping onto thin blade steel right here. I'm still on that very comfortable contoured handle all the way up behind the guard. And if the edge was right here, I'm still right up behind that edge, getting plenty of pressure on it, but I'm still gripped onto the handle. So I can understand the argument for larger fixed blades. I still personally wouldn't want this. I think it just gets in the way, especially if you kind of like over strike on a chopping motion. You kind of hit back here and then you're not hitting with the blade. Like, I would rather get it almost in, how much blade are we missing here? Like a full inch of blade. You can see by that square there, you would get a whole extra inch of cutting edge if this finger choil wasn't here. So that's just my opinion. You can take it or leave it. One other thing I was going to bring out here as an example, this is the Denko Knives Armiger 4. I just got this a couple days ago. I've been testing it, as you can see on all the wear on here. I've been striking fire steel with it, doing some wood processing, doing all my normal EDC tasks, but this does have a sharpening choil. I wish that wasn't there. I haven't had a ton of problems with this getting snagged because it's so small and you have a 4-inch blade, so I can kind of stay away from that, but wish that wasn't there. But the reason I bring this out is to talk about if this had a forward finger choil. Some people would say, oh, well, I want to be able to choke up right behind the edge, so if there was a finger choil here, I could go around this guard, I could get right up behind the edge, and I'm right nice and close to it. Again, yeah, this does have a guard, but I can choke up right onto that guard and be right behind that edge, right there. Especially if that sharpening choil wasn't here, I'm choking up right onto that guard. This isn't sharp. It's actually very well thought out. Even these little corners here on the rubberized handles are knocked off, so it's very comfortable. You can get up all the way to that edge. You don't need a 3/4 inch cutout in that blade, taking up sharpened blade length, to be able to get up right behind that edge. You can do that just like this. So, I don't know, guys. This is a personal thing that I've been thinking about for a while, wanting to make a video on it. I would really like to hear your guys' thoughts as to, do you agree? Do you dislike sharpening choils and forward finger choils? Do you like them? And if you like them, why do you like them? I'd kind of like to talk it out with you guys in the comments to get some better ideas. I used to be a person that liked forward finger choils on knives because I bought into the whole, oh, you want to choke up behind the edge, you get extra handle area. it just doesn't really make sense on larger folding knives. Like the PM2, in my opinion, the Spyderco Paramilitary 2, it makes no sense for that have to have a forward finger choil. I think it's a pretty similar handle length to the Andela. It's kind of like the grip area is like what the Para 3 is with the finger choil, but all handle. So you already get like plenty of grip area on the PM2, and then you're taking like 3/4 of an inch of the blade or a half inch of the blade to put an extra finger choil when you can just already choke up like this and get right behind that edge. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So there are some applications in small knives where it makes sense, but I think it's very overused in the community, and people just don't really think through why exactly they want it. They just, oh, forward finger choil, I can choke up on the knife. Okay, well, why do you want to choke up on the knife? Just something to think about. And again, I really genuinely don't believe there's any good reason to have a sharpening choil on pretty much any knife. Just let the heel of the blade develop. It's fine. It's not going to get caught on anything then. So that is it, guys. That is my rant. It is over. Please let me know down in the comments what you thought of this. If you are very angry about this, please leave me an angry comment. Your hate comments help me out in the algorithm just as much as your positive comments. So I'm not going to link to any of this stuff down below because this isn't really a product-centered central video. It's just talking about everything. So no links other than I will link to my channel sponsor, Auxiliary Manufacturing, his page and discount codes and all that good stuff. But other than that, that is it. Rant over. I will see you guys in the next video.